To the moon. This is To the Moon. A Drarry fanfic. This is, I believe, the 17th episode, and it is gonna be the finale. So, might take a hot minute, but it's the finale, so get yourself prepared. As in the last episode, Draco got turned back to his regular age. So now it is August 25th to September 1st. What the time skip says. Harry could never catch a sight of Draco Malfoy. He was unbelievably elusive. But then Harry didn't go down to the dungeons anymore either. And that's where Draco was spending every second of his time. Harry ran into Greg and Vince at mealtimes, but other than that, even his contact with those two Slytherins had become nil. They told him in brief moments between eating and running back to the dungeons that Draco wasn't handling it well at all. He was horrified that Harry Potter had taken care of him, that Harry Potter knew secrets about his childhood that not even his childhood friends knew. He was mortified that Harry Potter had slept with him, held him, played with him, changed his messy trousers, read to him, loved him. Most of all, he was humiliated that he had loved Harry Potter back.
"He won't let us talk about you,"
Greg said as he reached for a roll.
"He yammers about you with practically every sentence out of his mouth. But we can't even mention your name."
Vince patted Harry on the back before going back to his own lunch. "He'll get over it, Harry," he assured the miserable Gryffindor. "He's just a bit wiggled out." That he knew. Bit wiggled out that he could love someone so completely he hated so much.
Does he hate me again?"
Harry had to ask. The Slytherin boys exchanged looks. "Honestly, Harry," Vince shrugged. "We don't know. You're all he can talk about, but then that was generally the case before the summer. He was always going on about perfect Potter and perfect Potter this and Golden Boy that."
"He hasn't said one way or the other if he cares about you or not. If he cares about you still, or if he's going back to despising you."
Harry just nodded. His shoulders settled into the defeated slump they'd acquired in the last 3 days. "Is he at least eating?" he pressed. "He hasn't been to any meals." Greg nodded.
"Dobby's bringing him food,"
he reassured Harry.
His feelings as a child at least seem to have rolled over. As far the house help is concerned, the annoying thing practically henpecks Draco to eat. Draco just takes the abuse."
Harry smiled sadly.
"Oh well, sorry." Oh gosh, I apologize. I was really stuck to the desk. Harry smiled sadly. Dobby is it's rather a pain in the arse about those he cares for. They sat in silence, just eating for long moments. How's Poppet? Vince snorted. Growing like a weed. She misses you, he added softly. She's always walking around the dorm yelling, told Draco softly. What? Oh, mewing until Draco picks her up and pets her. Harry nodded. I miss her too. I miss you guys as well. He smiled up at them. Then swung his arm around Harry's shoulders and squeezed briefly. We miss you too, Harry. We miss you. September 1st. September 1st. First potion classes. All right, students. Snape sneered down All right, students. Snape sneered down at the assembled Gryffindors and Slytherins. Pair up. Quickly, before Snape could force pairings on anyone, the students partnered up. Ron and Hermione practically leaped at each other, as did Dean and Seamus. They left Harry as the only unpartnered Gryffindor in advanced potions. He glanced wearily around the Slytherins to see them partnered up as well, save for Vince, Greg, Draco. All four stood in the center of the room, hesitating. Is there a problem, gentlemen? Snape glared down at the desk. The four of them shook their head in denial. Then partner up. Vince sighed. You work with Draco, Greg, he murmured. I'll go work with Harry. Greg nodded. Silently, the remaining four boys went to work on the potions. Snape sighed in frustration as he watched every eye in the room, alternating between Draco and Goyle and Harry and Crabbe. Obviously, only an act of God would find him with a single accurate potion in the end of class. Eventually, as even Blaze and Pansy Cauldron had to Scorgify cast to keep it from exploding, Snape gave up. Since none of you are apparently able to do the practical, we'll see if you can manage the research. Snape, he snapped. I want 2 scrolls on the Civicus potion by tomorrow. Now get out of my class. Sorry. The students rose and fled from Snape's angry class. In the hallway, Vince grabbed Draco's arms, trying to get him to wait for Greg to catch up. In a move that startled the remaining students in the hall, Draco jerked away with a snarl. Keep your filthy Gryffindor hands off me, traitor. Vince stopped dead in shock, his eyes wide. What did I do? He asked, bewildered. Practically begging to work with Potter, were you, Crabbe? He sneered. Maybe a summer spent in the company of a Gryffindor has tainted your house pride. Greg stepped forward, an angry look on his face. Now just a minute, Draco. You didn't want to work with him. That must meant one of us had. So why are you being a bastard to Vince? Because he helped you out. Because he liked it. Vince Draco hissed. He turned to look at the confused Slytherin in question. What else did you learn? What else did you learn to like over the summer, traitor? You bending over for him? Vince practically staggered. Greg reached out a hand to steady his boyfriend and shot a glare of pure hatred towards Draco. To his credit, Draco actually looked ashamed by his comment, but he still held his head up. Hately.
What the fuck is wrong with you, Draco?
Craig deemed. You're both siding with him now. Draco deemed frantically. Siding with him? Draco snorted.
I wasn't even aware there were sides to begin with.
You're always eating with him, Draco pointed out bewilderedly, and talking to him. This is one step closer to you going over to his side. Greg opened his mouth to retort, but closed it just as quickly. He shook his head sadly and took Vince's elbow, leading him down the hallway out of sight. Draco watched him go with a pained look on his face, but let his mask drop when he noticed several Slytherins staring at him in shock. Just then, he was blindsided by another body. He looked up to see Harry Potter was pinning him against the dungeon's wall, fury in his eyes. Whatever problems you have developed with... What? Oh, okay. Whatever problems you have developed with me, he said, his voice like daggers, stays with me. Don't start taking it out on your friends. They don't deserve it. They gave up their lives for you this summer. Draco, the least you can do is respect them. Especially when they're still trying to do you favors. Draco stared at Harry wide-eyed in fear. Something he didn't care to put a name to, something that caused his chest to hurt. However, his breath quickened. Finally, Harry sneered and released him, turning to push his way through the thorns of people that clogged the hallways. When Harry disappeared right into the opposite hallway, he straightened his robes, looked up, right into Snape's cold gaze.
10 points to Gryffindor,
The professor said coldly, for promoting inter-house relations, sending up for a fellow student. 10 points from Slytherin for demonstrating such poor treatment of one's companions. September, end of second week, Great Hall. Harry stared past the Gryffindor table. He no longer cared that Ron or Hermione might see him. In fact, he was well aware they were watching him. They'd watch him for 2 weeks straight now. They'd watch him for signs of depression, for anger, for tears. They'd watched him staring out the window and endlessly rolling and unrolling Draco's birthday present. They'd watched him stop eating. They watched him slowly fade. They watched him slowly watching Draco. And they sighed. They fretted. And they tried to gently hug him back into reality. In the end, they would end up watching him die from the inside. They knew from talking to Vince and Greg that Draco was no better. He had apologized for his behavior and potions since the week before, but now he too sat for infinite hours. The child book propped open on his lap, puppet cuddled into his arm, staring into space. Draco had ceased speaking unless spoken to. He had ceased eating unless one of his companions filled his plate and shoved a fork in his hand. Dobby badgered him into finishing a full meal. They reported that they forced him to bed, but couldn't make him sleep. So here sat the star-crossed lovers, enemies, one on each side of the Ravenclaw table. Harry was staring with a fierce determination at Draco, as though he could blow the laugh back into the Slytherin. Draco staring with an equal determination at his plate, knowing Harry was watching him and totally unwilling to make eye contact with his Gryffindor. A commotion drew the attention of both boys back to the room. Lucius Malfoy stood, framed in the doorway, pausing to allow the entire hall to notice his entry. Only when his eyes began to glide across the room. Harry did not take his eyes off the blonde bastard as he made his regal way past the Gryffindor table. He paid no attention to the strange looks his housemates were throwing at him. He wasn't aware that he had started growling in the back of his throat. Malfoy stopped in front of the headmaster and leaned into converse with him. The headmaster leaned in to converse quietly with the headmaster. Hermione glanced over at the rest of the staff to find Madame Pomfrey watching Draco as though he were scraped from the bottom of his shoe. McGonagall's lips were pierced to the point that they were colorless. Snape watched motionlessly, though Harry thought she could see his fingers tightening on his glass. She noted that Vince and Greg dropped their dinner and were looming protectively over an ashen-faced Draco. Vince exchanged a weak smile with her, but Greg was totally focused on Lucius and Harry. As Harry. Okay. His expression was not so dismillier either. She looked back at Harry, and he had started to nearly vibrate in the seat, his hands clenched into fists. Ron's gaze moved continuously from the fist to Harry's eyes and back down to the fist, waiting for the moment he would have to jump up and keep his best friend to keep him out of Azkaban. Malfoy seemed to conclude his conversation with Dumbledore, who looked none too pleased. The former Slytherin bowed shortly and spun on his heel, smiling coldly down at the lengths of the Slytherin table. He caught sight of his son, who was trying desperately not to make eye contact with him, as he had just been trying to avoid looking at Harry Potter. "Draco," he called imperiously, tapping the snake head of his cane in the younger Malfoy's direction. "Come, boy, we are needed at home. Gather your belongings. Bid farewell to your little friends. It'll be an infinite day. If possible." Draco grew paler. Harry nearly shot out of his seat. Only Ron's powerful grip on his arm kept him in place. The other Gryffindors couldn't decide whom to watch, Lucius, Draco, or Harry. Draco pushed his plate carefully away from him, stood on shaking legs. Vince glazed up at him, eyes full of horror, words of denial on their lip. Draco cleared his throat and fixed his eyes on a spot directly behind his father. "No," he choked out, barely loud enough for the sound to carry to his father. Lucius frowned, anger building in his eyes. Greg and Vince took a moment to process what Draco had just done, and then rose as one blanketed him on each side. Lucius' frown increased. "What do you mean, no?" he bit out. "I gave you an order, son. Gather your things." Draco stood straighter, whether because he had his best friends giving him support, or because he realized that Malfoy couldn't do anything to him here. Harry didn't know. He didn't really much care. "No, father," came the clear response. "I will not." Harry closed his eyes, and Ron felt a bit of the tension in Harry's body leave. Thank you. breathed before opening his eyes. Opening his eyes back up to watch the Malfoy men in quite battle. And why not? Lucius narrowed his eyes dangerously. Draco took another breath. Oh. Ooh, sorry. Why not? Lucius narrowed his eyes dangerously. Draco took another breath and crossed his arms. Because we're not needed at home, he stated calmly. There are no family emergencies, no one is dead, and all your money is in place. The only reason you want me home is to have me marked. No sound was heard in the hall. Breaths were held. A bitterly cold expression came over Lucius Malfoy's face. There is indeed emergency, my son, he said in clipped tones. Cease your ridiculous babbling. Your grandmother on your mother's side is very ill. She's requested her presence at her side during her last days. He smiled sadly, a smile never quite reaching his eyes. Draco snorted. Grandmother died when I was in first year, and if I recall, her last request was that her whore of a daughter, her evil bastard son-in-law, and her sodding vermin grandson not be allowed to set foot in her funeral. Quiet murmurs were going around surrounding tables. No, father. Draco shook his head. You want to drag me home, to present to your lord for the dark mark, just like you wanted me to do this summer, and I won't go. He lifted his chin defiantly. Lucius' face was stark white. Lucius, oh wait, what? The only hint of color on his face was a small circle of red on his cheekbones. He grasped the head of his cane and took a threatening step forward before brought it up shortly by the wand in his throat. Oh. What? He grasped the head of his cane and took a threatening step forward before being brought up shortly by the wand in his throat. He gagged and froze to the spot. Put it down, Lucius, came a silky voice in his ear. Lucius snarled, but released his grip on the cane to only one-handed. What are you doing, Severus? He demanded, throat bobbing against the point of the wand. Why, Lucius, he purred. I thought you would have guessed. I'm taking a stand in the open. Finally, instead of sulking around darkened woods, listening and watching for you to make a fatal error. Lucius' eyes widened, and he made a turn. Snape grips on his arm. Lucius' eyes widened, and he made a turn. Snape's grip on his arm, and suddenly intense pressure of the wood against his esophagus changed his mind. You, he hissed instead. You are the traitor. You're the spy. Snape chuckled against Malfoy's ear. Jolly good work, old boy, he smirked. It only took you, what, 18 years to figure that out? You'll pay for this, Lucius promised him harshly. He'll kill you for this, for what you have done. Snape shrugged against his back. I'm sure he will try. Just as soon as he finds out, which I'm assuming will be directly after you leave, your tail wagging like a puppy with a particular juicy bone. He'll make you suffer. Wait, what? Lucius glared bloody death upon all, snickered at that. He'll make you suffer, he bit out. If he can get to me. I'm sure he will, Snape agreed. However, I'm well protected. Ah, yes, Lucius sneered. Your precious Dumbledore. Snape shrugged again. Among others. Lucius was visibly trembling in anger, his eyes promising pain as they skittered over Draco. Like Harry Potter, takes a breath could be heard across the room. Your beloved boy who lived. He can't protect you, Snape. He can't even protect himself. Snape actually laughed. And yet there he sits, quite alive. I'll think I'll take my chances with your boy. With the boy. Lucius smirked. Will he be a new master, Severus? Have you sold your arse to him for protection yet? Snape was suddenly in front of the blonde man. Hatred emanated from him in a wave as the wand dug even further into Lucius' throat, as though to bypass the threat of a spell to go straight into impaling his jugular. He's not my master, he hissed. I have no master now. I am finally free. For the first time in almost 20 years. Free of you. Free of him. I like it that way, and I don't plan on changing that any time soon. However, he moved closer to Sirius. Lucius's face, spittle flying from his lips as he spoke, landing on the creamy skin of the elder Malfoy. If the needed arose for me to swift fate late to a new master, I'd gladly go to my knees for Harry Potter, rather than submit to that maggot-filled carcass you worship. Severus! Snape chirked at the sound of Dumbledore's voice, causing Lucius to choke again. Yes, Albus. He replied with a forced calm. Let's just allow Mr. Malfoy to leave, shall we? Snape held motionless for a long moment before pulling back with a muttered curse. He backed away, holding his wand on Malfoy as he went. Malfoy rubbed his bruised throat with his eyes icy with hatred. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Headmaster. He responded a bit huskily after having a wand jammed into his voice box. However, I'm not leaving without my son. I'm afraid you are, Mr. Malfoy. Dumbledore shook his head again. Enough innuendo and a plain statement has been uttered here that I feel compelled to keep young Master Malfoy in Hogwarts protective custody. You may, of course, take this up with the Ministry of Magic if you wish. His hands folded into the voluminous sleeves in his robes and waited. Lucius gaped at Dumbledore. You. His eyes spun, searching the Gryffindor table. You! He screeched as his eyes lit on Harry. You did this. This is your fault. Harry stood to face his accuser, shaking off Ron's arm, but noting that Ron and Hermione stood at his side as well. Lucius sulked over to stand in front of them, causing the Gryffindor tables... Where am I? In front of the Gryffindor table, causing the student sitting between Harry and him to scoot down quickly. You did this, he repeated. Turned him against me. The bloody boy who lived in his nasty little fingers and everything. Draco makes his own choices, Malfoy. Harry replied evenly. No! Lucius nearly screamed. Draco isn't capable of making his own choices. He has to follow my guidelines, my rules, my footsteps until the summer. And you twisted him. You turned him against his family, against his future. I showed him kindness, Lucius, Harry snapped. Caring affection. And what? Small things a small child needs to survive. I did no turning of any kind, no twisting. If you are so determined to look for someone to blame, perhaps you should start with the way you treated him your entire life. Had I kicked him in the head every day, still have been an improvement over your parenting skills. Lucius gripped his cane, his eyes wide with a liar. You showed him lies wrapped in false promises, threats. What did you threaten him with? If he didn't stay with you, Potter. Imagine you couldn't wait to rub in his face what he owed you for his care over the summer. Harry leaned forward, eyes snapping with anger. I wouldn't do that, you bastard. He knows that. Really? Lucius seemed to calm instantly, smiling slyly. What else does he know, Potter? Harry flushed, hating this man with all the passion he could muster. Does he know you love him? Heads turned, so they were on a shrink from the verbal fight between Lucius and Harry over the pale visage of Draco. He refused to meet anyone's eyes, continued to stare across the room at his father and his defender. Does he, Potter? What was it you told me this past month? He tapped his finger against his chin thoughtfully. Ah, yes. I love Draco Malfoy. I love him at the age of 17. I love him at the age of 5. I'll sell my friggin' soul before I let you drag him down with you. Color was high on Harry's face. Color was high on Harry's face as Draco leaned in with a smirk. So, Harry, he whispered, causing the other tables to strain to catch his words. He is good in bed. 5, as he is at 17. I always thought so. As a shock rippled through the room, Harry saw red. The growl in the back of his throat was nothing Ron could do to keep him from attacking. Ron could do nothing. Ron could do would keep him from ripping this fucker's throat out. He launched himself over the Gryffindor table, tackling Lucius Before he could move away, he drove the older man into the ground, pleaded with the resounding crack that echoed through the room as Lucius had contacted with the stone floor. Screams went up from the Gryffindor's table as Harry and Lucius disappeared from sight. The sickening crack was followed by the dull thud of flesh on flesh. Every teacher in the room raced to help, though they weren't quite sure who they needed to help the most when it came into eyesight. Harry had the elder Malfoy pinned to the ground and was pounding the man's face. Curses flew from the boy's Curses flew from the boy's mouth and lips, angry accusations along with threats. "I'll kill you, you fucking baby reaper," he screamed, shrilly against the rhythmic thud of his fist. "I'll rip your fucking cock off and choke you with it." Harry didn't let fitness get in his way. He simply balled up his fist and pounded. Harry punched the older man in the head over and over again until no more satisfying cracks could be gleaned from his face, and Harry's hand was slipping off Lucius's skin from the blood. He transferred his rage to Malfoy's torso. Dimly, he recognized that there were bodies stumbling towards him, voices calling out to him to stop. But he had Lucius Malfoy where he wanted him for months, and there was no way he was giving up on that. He wouldn't know until years later how he casted the barrier. He supposed he shouldn't have been surprised that he didn't. After all, he had been known to spontaneously create spells in the moment of great anger or fear. But there was this glorious wall between Harry's vengeance and those who could interfere with it. Snape launched himself at Harry, intending to knock the boy off Malfoy. He noticed he was airborne, shimmering in the air in front of him. The shimmering air in front of him and curled to keep him from slamming his face into the barrier. Bloody hell. A moment later, he picked himself up and was casting to end the shield. His expression grew darker as the shield refused to respond. Dumbledore stepped forward and added his words to Snape's. The school would watch in awe and horror, in awed horror, as the adventure of the old magician failed to break the barrier. Snape dropped his wand and began beating the air. "Potter, stop! Bloody idiot! Can I kill him? Potter! Draco, get over here now, boy." I don't know who yelled that. Around the room, his hair whirling his shoulders. "Draco!" he shouted, the stunned blonde standing at the Slytherin table. "Draco, get over here now, boy." Draco shook off the stupor he seemed to have fallen in long ago with Greg and Benson, barreled over the tables until he was at his godfather's side. "Oh my." "No time for hysterics, boy," Snape snapped, grabbing him by the arm and planting him directly in front of Draco's head. And Harry said, "Talk to him, Draco," he ordered. "Make him stop. If he kills him, he'll go straight to Azkaban. He's not worth it. Harry, he's not worth it. Not to me." "But what can I?" Potter, you have to stop. You're killing my father." His hands shook as he pressed them against the shield. "Potter, stop. You have to stop. Potter, move away from Malfoy." Harry moved away from... "Oh, Potter, stop. You have to stop." Harry moved away from Malfoy's face and began to pummel his chest. Cracks could be heard from beyond the barrier, as well as a strange gurgling noise emanating from Lucius Malfoy. Draco shuddered and pounded a bit harder. "Potter! Harry, stop!" he pleaded. "Harry, please, Harry, you have to stop." Harry continued to pound. Draco could see the blood began to pool around from his father's form. One part of his brain Distanced from all the violence and hysteria, he noted that he was more worried about Harry going to the Dementors for this than he was his father. Life, blood spilling across the floor. Harry, please, he screamed. Please, Harry, you're scaring me, please, he moaned. Desperately hitting against the wall, like someone had flicked a switch, Harry stopped. He raised his head from his victim, a vicious snarl still on his face. Flecked with blood, and eyes that held an insane light. Draco caught his breath and flattened his palms against his shield. Harry, please stop, he breathed one last time. The light dimmed and Harry shook his head slightly. Draco, he whispered in confusion. Draco smiled through watery eyes and nodded. Yes, Harry, it's me. It's Draco, please stop. You'll kill him. You'll go to Azkaban. Harry stared mutely for long moments, and then he raised his hand to mirror Draco's on the shield. Unfortunately, his hand was smeared with blood and gore. Harry placed it on the barrier. What? Okay, wait, sorry. I got distracted. Harry stared mutely for long moments, and then he raised his hand to mirror Draco on the shield. Unfortunately, his hand was smeared with blood and gore, and when Harry placed it on the barrier, it smeared a crimson streak down against Draco's palm. The blonde jerked his hand back away from his father's blood, frantically inspecting his own hand to verify that it wasn't now covered in red fluids. His eyes shot back to Harry's, and he choked out, I'm sorry, before scrambling his feet and bolting out of the hall. Draco! Harry shouted, slamming both hands on the barrier, bringing it down in a surge of magic. Draco! He staggered to his feet, tripping over Malfoy's still body, thick warm arms wrapped around him, holding him stable until his feet were under him again. But at that time, Draco was gone. Draco, he called again softly. Let him go, Harry. Greg tightened his arm around the Gryffindor. He nodded to Vince, who took after Draco. Vince will find him. He'll be okay. You just need to calm down, Harry. He added soothingly, just calm down. Harry stared longingly out the door Draco disappeared through. Then sagged in Greg's arms as the adrenaline, the rage, and the magic wore off. The last thing he felt before the darkness took over him were Last thing he felt before the darkness took over him were Greg's comforting arms around him. I know I said this was going to be the final episode, but it is not. There's going to be one more episode after this, and I believe that has to be the final. But, yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Bye!